garden is called The Flight of Fantasy by Indigo Landscapes, and it is just that. It's a fantasy garden. And how's that been created with these beautiful trees, lovely soft tree ferns, kind of reminds you of a forest, and then the lovely underplanting. And of course, every good garden needs to lead you somewhere. Remember, when you're thinking about your gardens back home, where do your pathways lead to? I mean, do they just go to nowhere? If they're going nowhere, well, then you've got to change your design. So tell me about this awesome garden.
And it's kind of like a shady rainforest garden. And then we've got lots of little concrete creatures and things that we've introduced throughout the garden.
Now, I love the fact that you've drawn people into the garden. Tell us a bit about the design element. You know, when you first had this concept, where did that inspiration come from?
I think it's important to find a little peaceful spot for us. Always we're looking for a quiet little place to go and relax. So we want to do a little meandering path because the show is quite busy. So the garden is like a little mini Eden that we want to pull people into the space, stop, have a look around at all the little plants and the water feature and the creatures, and then they can move out onto one of the other stands on the other side.
And I think that's an important point, not only in a show garden like you've created today, but in your gardens back at home.
Yeah.
Because we all need that kind of place where we can run and hide away from the family if you need to. But
Have
you
a
know what
glass of
I
wine.
mean. Exactly. And this little garden does just that. Talk us through the build-up, and it must have been quite an event to create a garden like this in 3 days.
It was challenging. What people must remember is that there's a solid floor that you're working on here, so you're not digging holes and sticking things in the ground. We wanted the garden to look as natural as possible, so we brought in mounding and the rolling sort of hills and that. But it's also a very tight space, you know. So this is proof that you can do a lot in a small space, a courtyard garden or a little townhouse garden.
Absolutely. And getting your materials in and the time constraints, was there ever the moment where you thought, I'm not going to get this done?
We almost threw our toys a few times, but then things were slick and it went very well.
Now, the pressures of building show gardens bring about them all sorts of challenges.
It does.
Talk us through some of the plants that you chose, because it's primarily all these plants will love growing under
Yes.
the foot of big trees.
Yes.
And anybody can literally take that garden and literally put it into a shaded spot. Now, was the plant selection quite difficult?
Not really, it's combinations that I love using. We've got our Celery tree ferns, which get much bigger. We've got the smaller Dixonia tree ferns. Brought in Earrin Lilies with white flowers. So you're playing with textures. You've got the fine fern leaves as well, the remoras. And then we've got colour underneath, little cyclamens and strobilanthus and streptocarpus, just to bring in little details on the bottom.
Now, the colour that's in the garden, that's quite fine for the winter period. What I love about it is that you can then take those out, and in summer you can pop something else in. I mean, what kind of plants would you imagine going in there?
I think for summertime you can bring in a few foxgloves if you want to give a bit more height, a bit more texture. The New Guinean patience would be great.
Yeah, and begonias would do well in there as well,
Awesome,
of course, yeah.
But keep the colours subtle. You don't really want the Taj Mahal there, you know.
Yes, no, you don't want a loud noise inside there, because it is very gentle.
Yeah, it must be calm.
And I think that's also very important when people are choosing their colours for their garden, because green is very calming.
Yes.
Now, talk us through the cement projects. I mean, it seems like you guys at Indigo had an absolute ball putting them together.
It was definitely a labour of love.
Yes.
But like we did a log, for example, which was chicken wire, and then we had our like a fibercrete cement over, but we mixed leaves, crushed leaves from the garden, which gives a rough finish.
Okay.
Some of the other creatures are just little cartoons that I sketched, and then we decided to make them into little animals which can be used in kids' gardens, or that's the fantasy side of it.
Yes.
So the one is like a strange little chicken thing. He's got a soccer ball inside him to give a structure.
Yeah, a soccer ball.
Soccer ball. And then the chicken wire, and then we just molded everything with like a fibercrete product that we mix bonding agent to make
Yes.
it more pliable.
It really is amazing. I mean, and those little creatures are just too beautiful. And you can definitely see it was a labor of love. You've also got some other little kind of mushroomy things happening in there.
Yes.
Talk us through those, guys.
Yes, the mushrooms were all sort of made. We took sand and made an indentation and poured cement in there.
Right.
Then we had either different marbles or pieces of stained glass or something.
Yes.
In that layer of sand, when we poured the cement on
For
top,
sure.
it would sit in there.
Yes.
And then we push a little pole in the top, and then once it's dry, you have your mushroom. You just
Awesome.
wash the sand off.
Well, you know what for me is probably the most amazing is when we set out with this whole project and we said to folks, right, guys, come up with some ideas, is that I think it's been quite a journey for you.
Yes. Yeah, it's
to
been
experiment
fantastic.
and try.
Yeah.
Had you ever worked with cement in such detail before?
Not really. I mean, we did build a few fish ponds many years ago, you know, doing your wire work and then putting the cement over and working with oxides and creating fake rocks like that.
Yes.
But we've never done logs, and the little creatures that we've got in the garden, I mean, we've got a little water feature bubbling, and we've got little birds and a snake in the tree, and all that kind of stuff is just, it's new stuff for us, but it's fun.
And was it that difficult?
It was, it's just time consuming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well done. And,
Thank you very
and once
much.
again, congratulations. What I love about this garden is the great underplanting. So many of us end up in gardens with existing trees or tree ferns where the underplanting can be quite tricky. And we sit there and we say, nothing's going to grow. Well, of course, things can grow. The great combination of this Celery Oak, remember, this is a perennial, grass-like plant. It does get a little flower, very small little white flower, but it's grown mainly for its foliage. This plant, and here's a good tip, if you've got one, dig it up, divide it into many plants and spread it around your garden because it grows like wildfire. How easy is it to kill? Not very easy. So if you're a beginner gardener, this is a plant that you want, and it loves growing in the shade. The gentle underplanting of this beautiful Boston gold fern. Now notice, it isn't this color because it needs food, because sometimes plants do look like that. This Boston gold is the color of its foliage. Gorgeous and deep dark shade because it just lifts area. And as an indoor plant, Bob's your uncle, it does really well. Right over here on either side, planted up with the Earrin Lilies. Remember, Earrin Lilies love growing in the shade. Enjoy a bit of wet feet. If you have the colored Earrin Lilies at home, remember, they need sun. Whereas these Earrin Lilies, the white ones, prefer a semi-shade to the deep shade. So that's one thing to remember. But all in all, this is a great garden, somewhere to go in, explore, have a look at it, and of course, all the really interesting creatures that they've made.